Hi, I'm Emma Campbell and this is my presentation, Upsetting Language and Visual Disturbance in Abortion Activism. This paper will outline art as activism, my own creative practice, the current visual discourse in the public arena and the pivot in that discourse aided by activists like myself, both as part of larger projects and through my own creative practice. As you can see from this poster, the work I have made does not begin in a vacuum. Women working with cameras have been intrinsic to the feminist movement. The decades preceding us saw feminisms whose struggles for equal rights, equal pay, childcare, reproductive rights and an end to sexism, racism and poverty. These women found each other at demonstrations and community projects and decided to work together to carve out their own spaces as they had been shut out from the mainstream of photography. All the work I present today is therefore made on the shoulders of these amazing women who broke through working and publishing barriers for us. My current photographic work is politically engaged, often takes a collaborative form, adopting an oppositional stance with regards to the dominant forms of visual representation and ideology around women's bodies in Ireland. The practice is situated within the grassroots feminist community in Ireland on both sides of the border. As you can see from the presentations by my colleagues, the major political focus of the contemporary feminist movement in Ireland is currently the issue of abortion access. Therefore, thousands of us are mobilising to challenge the dominant misogyny enshrined in the legal and political systems in each jurisdiction in Ireland, which has resulted in a refusal to adopt a rights-based approach to women's bodies and abortions. The abortion rights movement in both the north and south of Ireland has provided the social basis out of which this practice has developed. As a member of a number of groups involved with abortion advocacy, including Alliance for Choice Belfast, the Abortion Rights Campaign, Belfast Feminist Network, Inroads, the Homework Collective and Exile, I want the work I create to speak honestly from within and as an intrinsic part of the feminist abortion rights movement, rather than the work of a journalist who drops in for just one story and leaves again. Griselda Pollock has said of feminist artists using photography, "Can we see with the artists this investigation into the image as a cultural site of both psychoanalytic experience, of fantasy, desire, identification and pleasure, and political action, in which their works could serve at once as inquiry and impulses for change." Photography has a history of antagonistic practice, often a significant site for cultural production in opposition to prevailing power structures. Feminists have understood its power of immediacy and utilised it from its inception. Feminist practitioners have been successful at parodying the ideas of commodity fetishism and their own dark content of desires, most especially when dealing with issues of self-representation and gendered stereotypes. Often their work will have an acknowledgement of the dominant ideologies by referencing popular culture and means of visual communication. Reflecting on my own photographic practice, I will show how the need for images of women within the discourse of abortion in Ireland remains unsettled in a culture still struggling to imagine women. Not only will I show work that proffers women as whole, fully realised humans, but also as agents of possibility and change within a deeply misogynistic culture with rigid boundaries of how we are to embody femininity. The first project, When They Put Their Hands Out Like Scales, includes a book, an exhibition of photographs and a film, all of which reflected the experience of an abortion seeker from a first-person position. Women aren't shown as victims, othered as a tragedy, but represented in a way which gives a voice to the women who've become part of Ireland's collective secret without othering the subject. The photographs from this work are taken from the first-person perspective, reenacting a woman's abortion journey across the Irish Sea and through England to the clinics in Liverpool, London and Manchester, a travelling narrative of exile and rejection by the state. The images are shot so that the viewer feels they see things from the woman's perspective, as if they are on the journey themselves, eliciting a greater empathy in response. This documentary style means the emotional response is provided according to the viewer's interpretation rather than straight manipulation. As a visual device, where the subjectivity of an abortion seeker becomes embodied by the audience, it is simply and powerfully presented as an opportunity for the development of empathy with a subject who is otherwise made invisible in society. A fellow Homework Collective artist, Siobhan Clancy, has said, Emma's ongoing dialogue with abortion seekers as an activist imbues her work with an integrity and demonstrates transformative potential for both subjects and audience as witness to an erased history. As Grant Kester has said of dialogical work, It can challenge dominant representations of a given community and create a more complex understanding of and empathy for that community among a broader public. With regard to empathy, Kester identifies 3 specific functions can fulfill: solidarity creation, solidarity enhancement, and the counter-hegemonic, all of which undeniably dovetail with feminist activist objectives. Journeys relate to everyone's experience, and so it does not require a great leap to empathise with the abortion seeker's experience in Ireland, whether the journey is themselves, the pills, or the other direction as an asylum seeker. The text in the book contains verbatim quotes from the Northern Irish ministers on an assembly debate on abortion. Removed from their pulpit-like performances in the chamber, the text is often unbelievable, yet here it is reprinted alongside the abortion journey to remind us all of the public dialogue ever present with which the abortion seeker has to contend. By the end of the book, however, we get to encounter the amazing women of the Abortion Support Network, who facilitate women making this journey by fundraising, meeting them at airports, and even welcoming them into their homes where accommodation is unaffordable or not possible. This section of the book moves from the first person to portraits, warm, welcoming, and facing the audience head-on. Following on from the first body of work, I then made a series of archived collages entitled "When They Put Their Hands Out Like Scales, Women on Waves." On the 11th of June 2001, Women on Waves set sail for the Netherlands for Ireland, a country with the most restrictive abortion laws in Europe. 5 days later, over 300 women had called the ship's hotline. Women who had been raped, schoolgirls, mothers who couldn't pay for childcare or a journey to England, political refugees who did not have travel documents, and many more. Women on Waves counselled women with unwanted pregnancies, did tests, ultrasound scans to establish dates, and provided information about distributed contraceptives. Today, Women on Waves also operates as Women on Web, distributing the abortion pills to women in countries like Ireland and Northern Ireland, where abortion is still almost impossible to access legally. After being given free access to the Women on Waves archives in March of 2014 in Amsterdam, I began to work with these images, wishing to acknowledge the colonial and religious factors preventing access to abortion in Ireland. Thanks to the 1861 images from the National Library of Ireland and the British Library, I was able to combine all 3 perspectives. Having shown the bookwork already in a large solo exhibition in Dublin, I had the opportunity for another solo exhibition in Belfast in 2014. Bringing all of the work together, I was able to show the book, video piece, and the collage work. I also used this time to activise the art space. Much like my predecessors had done when they accepted an exhibition in London's Hayward Gallery in the 70s, I worked with activists in Alliance for Choice like Kelly O'Dowd and academics such as Dr. Fiona Bloomer to engage members of the public and students in a public gallery space by holding workshops, activist meetings, and public lectures. This interplay of historic, religious, and colonial forces on the rights of women's bodies with women's activism would lead me to the next project. An appropriate hobby. Both colour photography and the laws against abortion in Ireland were first formed in 1861, an era of emerging modernity that also saw the growing suffragette movement. Suffragettes were the first subjects of state photographic surveillance, yet were aware of the power of photography to build their movement. The same era saw butterfly collecting as an appropriate hobby for the clergy or unmarried ladies. Butterflies are often regarded as symbols of freedom and change by many cultures. Their capture and collection can reflect the harsh and sometimes fatal consequences of trying to pin down sexual behaviour and confine people to rigid gender stereotypes. When I discovered that photography was also invented in 1861 by a Scottish man, Maxwell, who produced this, the first colour photograph, I began to draw connections. All of these visual moments centred around this very Victorian set of ideals and were beginning to bump together in my brain. I thought I could add the passport photographs of abortion activists to become this collection of strong women, making our faces visible and powerful, no longer hiding. The passport photograph reminds us of both the travel of those who go to clinics and the surveillance of those who wish to use abortion pills at home. This piece is a work in progress, which, when finished, will present a collection of a swarm of passport photo butterflies. This will feature activists representing the thousands of women who are forced to travel or risk prosecution with imported pills to access abortion, printed out passport size to be examined with a magnifying glass. The project encompasses the legacy of suffragette activism with the contemporary feminism. It links up new picture technologies with Victorian categorisation and references the first ever colour photograph. It also overlays the issue of bodily autonomy central to contemporary feminism onto ideas within dominant patriarchal discourse about appropriate gendered sexual behaviour. Importantly, it also takes back the visual terrain. The strategy of anti-abortionists to make fetal personhood a self-fulfilling prophecy by making the fetus a public presence addresses a visually oriented culture. Meanwhile, finding positive images and symbols of abortion hard to imagine, feminists and other pro-choice advocates have all too readily ceded the visual terrain. The purpose of all this artistic research is to insert positive, strong images of women onto the dialogue around abortion. This practice reflects my historical research on women's photography groups in the 70s and 80s that used their photography to challenge the representation of women in popular cultural discourse. The International Planned Parenthood Federation has noted the lack of appropriate imagery and the stigmatizing effect of this lack, where disembodied fetal imagery or very pregnant women are used to illustrate abortion discussions in the media. This research will provide engaging imagery of women willing to be seen as supporters of abortion rights. By making it obvious that women are not willing to be identified, it may imply that abortion is something that women should feel ashamed or guilty about and that it should not be disclosed to others, from the International Planned Parenthood Federation's guidelines. The images will all be of women who also work within an oppositional sphere as part of the movement towards reproductive justice. Every participant, through their work within the activism field, will be cognizant of their potential as an abortion seeker. Many will have had abortions themselves or helped others who have. Therefore, every participant will be a knowing and willing representative to face the counter the stigmatizing discourse around women's bodily autonomy in pregnancy. Sadly, I don't have time to describe where all of these works have been used in the public domain, but I will leave you with links to where you can see the pieces. There is also another project called the Exile Project, where women in Ireland and Northern Ireland have volunteered their face, which I've also been a part of but have not been able to speak on now. Thank you very much for listening.